How y'all doing? So within the lives, there's a part in the lives in the introduction where there's an important energetic keynote where you have to let things kind of just breathe, let them settle in, right? Because if you're like I'm bringing something of a quote unquote a rigid style end quote. Because so what would that rigid style mean? It means I'm kind of coming prepared within what I'm gonna spring forth from the foundation of particular types of intellectual literary works. And these literary works, they mirror and reflect something that is nonfiction to fictional. And from that fictional, then it goes back to something of a nonfiction to your particular type of personal life. So it applies to your personal life, and based on how you're taking care of your general affairs, particularly your intelligence, then you could brush that intelligence to brush your awareness, to then brush more intelligence of yourself, to be aware even more so of how the changes of the times are happening, right? So the change, like we're more or less quote unquote helping each other, assisting each other, or not, end quote. And what I mean by that is there's just an opportunity that's there, and how we have to have a quote unquote a particular type of mature perspective, end quote, where we're not, it's like, it's not about just like perceiving it without intelligence and without awareness of someone's just doing this in a certain way, and how you think someone's doing it, it's not that. It's like, it's not just like shooting blanks, it's coming prepared with a presentation, so you can look back to it and see it's a rigid style class structured setting, right? After I rebound off of what I'm about to talk about, right? And I should have brought my water for this one, but I'll just talk more softly. So because obviously, like, if you're talking a lot, then the hydration process will like be needed, right? It will be needed to be commenced. So pretty much, as I breathe through this, and maybe this will be the intro, and maybe this will just be like the setting right here, to where to where it to where, like, things could be self-organized. It's important for things to be organized, obviously, but it's up to you to want to get the whole story, and it's up to you to be aware of a bigger council that understands the whole story, and that bigger council, quote unquote, energetically, standardly as it is, trumps, end quote, the individual, because it's a bigger shared intellectual energy party of a new, quote unquote, mental emanation through a collective shared thought form, right? So the collective shared thought form per a quote unquote some type of council and some type of particular state of power or whatever, end quote, that has a more governing energetic effect, because it's a shared acknowledgement of what is tried, true, just, and correct energetically, right? So and I've just been flowing like this for like, this is the 9th year of it, right? So I'm like kind of chill these days, but at the same time, I'm still alert and I'm still aware, which is the never-ending work, right? A particular type of brushing up on the awareness is to keep up with the awareness. So let me pause real quick, and let me get my water. And now that the memory is not constricted, I could kind of like look forward to like not being choked up, right? So there's this process of like the reality could be trying to like choke you up, in that metaphor, right? Like it's trying to like get you to like focus on some type of work, right? Because if the life is like quote unquote misaligned, there's quote unquote some type of accountability, cause and effect issue, end quote, or response that is holding you there for you to like kind of like even out some type of quote unquote karma, right? End quote. But I don't really like that word karma anymore, because I feel like it could just kind of like misdirect, and it's not necessarily representing the true perception of it, you know. So the words don't necessarily represent the true representation of what it really means in other contexts and more holistic contexts, right? So and like so I feel kind of like, you know, I feel kind of like well toned within this presentation, because I got 2 books I'm gonna bring out, and and my style is like I like sometimes, like I try not to repeat myself, but when I repeat myself or when I re-emphasize something, it's so I can understand it more, you know. I'm not just saying it just to keep saying it. I want to understand it. I want to quote unquote master it, right? And quote, whatever that means, you know, to master something. What does it mean to master something? You invest your life, your soul, your soul's energy, your soul's attention, and from your soul's intention wanting to do its crazy other shit in other dream realms, it crossed through different dimensions, densities, and layers of consciousness, reality, and existence for it to participate in a 3D physical earth material matter reality, which is the humans. And now it's reflecting and it's refining its new attention based on how it has to grow, and it forgot itself to what it ultimately could be, going towards it being the soul, and the soul in a weird paradox being like the first thing. So we could be inside out of the soul perhaps, and obviously the predecessors already like are like more or less like advanced beings, are like they're experimenting with that, right? And this is the experiment, you going through your individual 3D to 4D to 5D incarnation of life, and just finding out what other things are hidden in the higher realms, and you working towards that in just your subjective way, right? Oh, and here's a flag right here. So let me rep. Might as well rep it, guys. Rep it. Woo! Bam! It's like it's like the staff of holy life. So I got the staff of holy life right here with me, mother flippers. Anyways, but I'm a chill person, you know. Aside from all the hype of everyone's individual incorrect intelligence. So the thing is, I could speak about literally like pretty much anything, right? Because I'm just like, you know, that's just where life is like, you know, taking us. But I don't necessarily have to speak on certain things of how certain like certain people are just, you know, some people want to like, you know, there's just like a certain process and effect that's there, and you know, life in the universe is just kind of like waiting to see what's gonna happen, because in the end, in the future, real transparency will take effect without the rhetoric of it, right? Because the essence of transparency is to live out whatever you're saying that you're gonna do, right? Whatever you say that you're gonna do, beyond the word of it, you're gonna have to live out the action and the being and the nature of the word to be follow up on that yin and yang transparency dynamic. For you to follow up on the word transparency in itself, whatever you're saying, you have to become what you say. So it's like I am the word of quote unquote, you know, source God or whatever, end quote. And however the similar spiritual teachings within every religion can point to in its one polarity, because it's how the religions are being used, and there's just a niche polarity there. So within the niche polarity, it's like one of the main sub points of this video was to see like how will AI be used? Well, we have to understand the polarities of things within the polarity of just the artificial intelligence of its own thing. How is that going to be used within just the non-intelligence of, or the non-awareness, or just that kind of like, you know, the kind of like something that's leaning towards more of like a gross intelligence that's away from source intelligence, but it's still intelligent, but it's not like a soul intelligence. It's not a soul whole intelligence. So it's a gross intelligence, but it's still intelligent, right? Because obviously it has the will to do things. But it's like, it's how we're using the artificial. Is it too much like scientific energy distortion ways? Like, you know, and just like distortion, quote unquote, times like, you know, that, you know, like multiplied like the the detrimental multiplied detrimental multiplied detrimental, when that makes an effect, it makes in some effect when it accumulates enough, there's a scientific energy reaction accumulation esoteric factor where more detrimental energy comes about how you're using it. So it's a dynamic in context of polarity. So it's like, how are we using the artificial intelligence? How is that going to be used? Is it going to be used in like a real holistic, transparent way that's quote unquote benevolent? But even excuse that word, because the human monkey mind doesn't understand the real spiritual shit. Or is the artificial intelligence going to be used in such a way where it's just completely like the real pure balanced gods, they see behind the veil of the manipulation, right? But the manipulation doesn't know that because they're so secure that they've been living in a world where they think their mask could shield them and hide them for what they are. But in this new world, the collective energy and intelligence has the reason to see through the veil of people, right? So we're seeing through the veils of people themselves because the rhetoric doesn't match the energy within what you're saying you're going to do, what you're about. It's not, it's like it, and that's always been known, but for them to not realize it, their mask has been just kind of like sealed on them for such a long time, where the patterns in the psychology and the samskaras and the habitual patterns of just, reactions and the psychological behavioral patterns, that they're fixed in such a way where that fixation is accumulated, where their response is it's a unique type of rigidity, right? And at first the words aren't good or bad, but they could be like, there could be like a detrimental effect, right? There could be like an off-key effect, an out-of-tune effect, right? Within just standard things, like generally, and obviously that could have various contexts. So within that, it's like as the collective consciousness in this fucking earth, wherever it goes, we could see through agendas pretty much based on general behind the work spiritual teamwork, right? And I could go more in on that, and people are playing that part because that's the genetics that they were passed down to, and that's what they ultimately like. That's ultimately where their soul left off at, in a different spiritual resonance matching system, for them to actually incarnate from what they already were, because it's an advanced, sophisticated process of like as above, so below refraction process of how one reflects their higher self, is based on where that recent part of themselves and how they wanted to ascend in a unique way, in a unique reason, or how did they want to descend in a unique way, in a unique reason. And obviously the reason could be provoking and titillating. We came to Earth because there was a new innovation in just material matter of Earth, spirit, and human. So it's Earth, spirit, and human casually is why we showed up, because it's not a bad thing that we showed up to like the 3D middle dimension place, or quote unquote, I'll call it 3 to 5D, right? In that, but like them being kind of like put together, right? So within that like 4D to 6D like axis that we're living in right now, we're kind of in between, like in just a different universal context, we're kind of in between like different stages of heaven and hell. We're like in the middle of that, and we incarnated on this middle plane because that's the soul's testament to balance itself without, and it doesn't need anybody's human understanding. It's here, you're existing for your own reason of just your own like resemblance of just your I am, right? You're just being, right? So within your beingness, and however you like became aware when God became aware, and that connection started to have a unique relationship in a different realm beyond the humans and the earth, then you came to like reincarnate and incarnate into new surface level dimensions, not good, not bad, just to follow up on a different strand of evolution, spirit, earth, and human. So within that spirit, earth, and human, I have 2 books here. I have the Essential Tao, book 1, and then the book 2, I have Chaos, Gaia, and Eros. So why did I just pick these 2 books? Why did I just pick these two books? So here we got the Essential Tao, right? So just based on its worthy praise and essence of beauty and luxury within the spirit, the Essential Tao, and obviously original open source and more original galactic artificial intelligence could keep track ironically and do better in what all of these lower denomination program construct factors say they could do. There's literally energetically in a higher universe and higher space of magnitudinal level living being, whatever you say, it could be done better. Oh shit! I think some issue happened. So I left off with saying there's a higher place of being, and I don't know if it's like if it's like kind of squirgling out or whatever. Squirgling out. I'm just saying, like, beyond the rhetoric of human intelligence in 2025, I believe there's a higher place where things can be done better. Respectively, if we want to get really advanced and sober, which is with just the science fiction of the 1960s and 70s, then mathematically through the times and the fucking decades in 2050, no matter what, if we get energy reciprocation from 2050, then that's beyond China 2030, just within the basic math of time, right? Because it's in a high, they have spent and accumulated more focus and energy within a different time, and for us to reciprocate with a different field of time and bring it back to this present Earth, dependent on the geographic location, then whoever masters the quote unquote time travel end quote would be the quote unquote master of innovation, right? End quote. But nothing can really be done by oneself per se. You know, there's always like a teamwork factor for things to keep thriving, and that's a different thing. And that's ironic because this fucking book right here it's a true timeless book, right? It's not necessarily subjective just to like the Asian continents. It's a nature dynamic that is archetypical, and it's portraying the different concepts of nature and archetypes within generations and geographies. So I'm just trying to break down the wisdom and the math and the science of things. And the science of things is, how are we using AI? We could be using AI, obviously, and we could go quote unquote beyond AI, right? End quote, within the essence of the Tao, right? Because the Tao is just telling you the changing of the seasons and the changing of the times, right? So the changing of the seasons and the changing of the times are right there, right? So look at the changing. So this is the book, the essence of the Tao. And that energy of the wisdom is participating within this present time, day and age moment of how far we've came with artificial intelligence, right? And then the math of it is the time, right? So the time is passing, and based on the more advanced time, however the individual or the nation or the personal person could go ahead of time, or they came from time, then they're bringing the more advanced shit from a more advanced time. Math. So that's science, math, and now the wisdom, practice what you preach type of shit. And like on a different energetic level, you can't lie to the universe. We are the results of how we've worked with the universe on a very deep esoteric scientific level, because you are a reflection of what your soul is doing, right? So I hope it's not like squiggling out, you know. But the two books that I brought were the Essential Tao, and then this book is just intuitively mind provoking. The second book is Chaos, Gaia, and Eros. And even though this could be like some type of like just general Greek interpretation of just a different, you know, perspective of prominent living beings of consciousness, and those prominent living beings of consciousness have established themselves on Earth with a different dynamic factor of a certain divine mother and her chaos and her kingdom, and then Saturn comes from like, you know, a certain chaos divine mother, so they're kind of more or less conjoined. And then Eros, some type of like just quite, you know, passion and war energy. So this is a Greek interpretation, or let me just I'll read it in the back. It's not necessarily Greek, but it cross references with it. So it's just an interpretation of an energy, because obviously like all the quote unquote quote unquote religions, end quote, they're trying to say the same thing, but they're just lost within some type of like control dynamic and ego dynamic within the paint of the development of the tedious underground artificial intelligence, right? Because that artificial intelligence has always been used pre-masses, right? So, and it's you know, let just let people fool themselves. If I were just to be calm with this shit, and I am calm within the grace of God, just let people fool themselves, and that's original by me. And if it, and you know, it just that's the open source of it, you know. But I'm just saying, like, the timestamps can be found casually and neutrally. If someone wants to be like, oh, you're being a hypocrite. Wait a minute. Whoa. Like, how long have I been doing this? But anyways, I bring up these two books, and I'll. So this is just an intro to this shit, right? So this is a beautiful intro, and I'm just saying, like, there's an energetic key factor that says this is Ridgid style because I came prepared within a pre-synopsis of just the intuition that's happening right now, and seeing how this is quote unquote essential. Because why is this book essential? This book is essential because it's a timeless, you know, empedecium or something, or empedecum, of or it's just a timeless, you know, assist ally tool, you know, of how it has its own reports of how it observed nature within human beings and how they have a relationship over time and how things kind of build and decay within the process. And this is just here to help us. And obviously I recognize how other people like have been on this shit, you know, like this is around the ballpark of 3,000 years and before that, right? So obviously, like, a respect to China, respect to all the Asian countries, respect to, like, you know, the irony here is, like, respect to everybody. But, like, obviously, I don't know other people's reasons for why they will war. So that's why the fucking quote-unquote esoteric law systems in the higher realm, end quote, exist. And now there's a change of guard. So throughout the time of the threshold of being, naturally and neutrally saying it, you will see a particular type of shift. And now I picked this book because this will help with the shift, right? So since this book will help with the shift, it's just saying how we will grow. We will do shit with God unconsciously or consciously, and then we will die. And the karmic process is spanned out through time, like jelly or something. And then this book is trying to point to, like, just the fucking narratives, the fucking in the paint shit, right? The in the paint of, like, you know, secret, you know, divine, quote unquote, dark beings, not good, not bad, doing different, you know, higher shit. And we're just a quote unquote byproduct, after effect, end quote, of this narrative play. And that's, it's not necessarily 100% no choice, but there's like a quote unquote 95 to 98 to 99% dynamic of no choice, based on we didn't necessarily choose in how we were born. You know, our parents chose how we were born, right? Or I'm sure there's paradoxes there. And then we are given some free will in how we will respond to things, and based on how will we respond, we will either come to meet some type of ascension process with God in a real transparent balanced way, or we're just going to try to cheat and rape and manipulate and lie that shit and just do things for lower octave 5D, right? Artificial detrimental 5D, right? So even 5D has polarities, because 5D is upgrading and downloading the third and fourth within itself. And now it's how it's being used in a more elevated state of consciousness and material being. That's like quote unquote 5D, right? So I chose these two books. So I'm gonna read these books, and I'm just kind of like flipping them around, just because I'm just flipping, and I'm just flipping them around because it's, you know, it's like I'm just kind of at awe of, like, it just takes two books for this age. Let's understand what the fuck is going on and have some real truth serum shit on a collective level. Because once we get the truth from a different level, then the truth is like it is the serum. It's the antidote of the air. So it's the antidote of the air, 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 air. It's the antidote. It's the antidote. It's the antidote of the air. Oh, 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 oh. So it's the antidote of the air. So within that, then from these things, from these energy triforce, Trinity, we could see just where our denomination is, right? Within the ancestry of things. And then we could quote unquote attempt to work with some small free will and some small percentage of quote unquote God, right? Oh shit. All day, quote unquote. See, that's the thing. We see, that's the thing right there. It's like there's no judgment in you growing up, right? But there is someone that could analyze whether it's correct or not. But the thing is, we really don't know God, right? Because we're only barely coming to the spiritual understanding of the pieces of the spiritual intelligence and the spiritual knowledge of what's really, quote unquote, really originally possible, end quote. And what I mean by that is, since we're only getting clues of it, if there's clues of this and quote unquote God is supposed to be all powerful, then we don't necessarily know anything, right? Because like we're barely understanding that all of this shit is powerful. I mean, all of this shit is like all of these different pieces have different unique powers. What am I talking about? Vedas are saying spiritual powers. So if the Vedas are saying spiritual powers and we're barely coming to realize and research understanding of different quote unquote spiritual powers, double quotes, because you have to really process what I'm saying, is you have to work for that and you have to go beyond general perversion of things. And I'm not trying to give anybody a hard time of like, if you have a perverted mind, you know, I mean, like, that's not gonna work in every scenario, right? Because there's like a pivot aspect. So within that, it's like we really don't know what God is. You know, God is like he is the source of the powers, right? And for him to be so like hidden and secret and unknowing underneath all of that shit, to preserve all that shit and give us crumbs, ironically, of that shit, and we're paying to go to that, then that's our research process, right? It's our research process of how can we fucking not necessarily do fucking, and I'm not judging yet again, but it's like, how can we not just do demonic tantra, right? How can we do angelic tantra? For just a rough example, right? So there's a particular niche of polarities is what I'm saying. And there's another book I want to put over there. So we have to work towards how we have to work towards to get it standardly within the dimension that we're in. And then the quote unquote test is, how are we going to do it, right? Like, how are you going to use this shit, right? And then from using that, you're picking your path, and now you're going to reap the results of the experiment of your path, your choice, your micro free will choice, right? Because obviously, like I've been saying this shit for like a long time, you know, but I'm not trying to compare myself in such a way. I'm just trying to, like, for some reason, my energy and my purpose is to lean towards just to be quote unquote air-like informative. And from that, I get my own unique fulfillment. And I feel like I'm doing my own good energy work and duty when I do that. And whatever happens, happens. I'm not necessarily expecting anything, but we can expect someone in a quote unquote trusted relationship, end quote, to quote unquote tell the truth, end quote. But see, that's the thing. That's not always respected, or that's not always given, you know. It's not always an etiquette, right? It's not always a luxury. So since that's not happening, the esoteric walls will do what they will do beyond the human minds, right? So this is just an intro. I'm just going to keep flipping these books because for some reason, I'm just reminding myself in a rapid fire like motion. This book is more key because we could just kind of pause and try to like just find some type of like ground in, like, maybe we could study the Tao, and obviously it is, but this is just a friendly reminder of maybe like kind of like reapplying it within the reminder of it with AI, right? So like, how could AI possibly go through these roller coasters and these patterns of it having its own quote unquote increases and its rises and its jolts and its sparking, and then it have its own energetic downfalls and troughs and low points, right? Just on like how it has a surplus of data coming in, and then there's a recycling effect, and then there's like some type of quote unquote clearing out effect, and then there's a restart effect, right? So within that, the AI is learning from us, the humans, the nature, and the spirit, whether it wants to admit it or not. And energetically, those three and God and God's children are beyond the AI, because it's using the original spirit intelligence to school AI. So that's how God's children, quote unquote, end quote, are beyond AI, because it's using the spirit and how AI is being guided on a different original level. And we're a part of that. So in one essence, you could say some divine being, some original beyond chosen, and not and diffusing that shit with the predecessors' advanced etymology and whatnot, and maturity and real purpose, respectively, and just doing shit like and just being that shit, right? Just being that shit, working to be that shit or be that stuff or whatever. So this book particularly, because how are we using AI? How are we using AI? Right? And where in the timeline, based on the narratives, have created such a unique dynamic of this present moment within all of the universities. Oh, we're living college life. Okay, we're living college life. How did the fucking colleges get built? How did the fucking, how did the administration and the agencies and the head appointees and the administration council, how did they even get appointed to be where they're at? It's based on a certain type of ancestry and a secret reincarnation system for us to come back in a certain way to live off where we left off from our ancestry metaphysical family. And the metaphysical family, paradoxically, is quote unquote oneness, and it's not. It's one, and it's differentiated. And from that differentiation, it's not good and that's not bad. Confusion and war could happen from there, right? So I will read more from this book, and I'll read this one. So a chaos pioneer uncovers the three great streams of history: chaos, Gaia, and Eros. Deliteralizes history so we can see it not only as a sequence of events, but as a flow of ideas and cultural myths. This is an important book for understanding the past, living in the present, and shaping the future. Ralph Abraham. And let me read the back. The history of the world according to chaos theory. And this eclectic and interdisciplinary work, excuse me. In this eclectic and interdisciplinary work, chaos pioneer Ralph Abraham traces the history of consciousness through a rediscovery of the three forces that drive it: chaos, Gaia, and Eros, the mind, body, and spirit of evolution. With startling originality and clarity of vision, Abraham employs photographs, timelines, charts, and an engaging format to sweep the reader along on this wild ride through math, science, mythology, philosophy, and the whole of history. Sure to fascinate the poet, scientist, philosopher, and historian in all of us, Chaos Gaia Eros is a mind-bending masterwork that reunites the chaotic and mythological forces of human history and blows the doors off existing modes of thought. Quotes, this extraordinary work is a veritable Rosetta Stone unlocking the past, present, and future, end quote. Ralph Abraham has his own highly original ideas about the application of chaos theory to changes in history and consciousness, making for a rich and provocative blend. Ralph Abraham is the most readable and delightful of mathematical pioneers. He is in the great tradition of a Poincare and Whitehead, a true mathematical humanist. Chaos, Gaia, Eros is destined to be a voice shaping the new millennium. Author of Food for the Gods. So those last three sentences or mini paragraphs, they were quotes from different authors. So let me read the first. Let me just crack open. Let me just read the contents real quick. So part one, and obviously y'all can get this book. I showed you the book title and I gave you the artist's name. Or I'll read the contents tomorrow. I'm gonna read this. I'm gonna read the essential Tao, the back, but I'm not gonna read the quotes. Thomas Cleary's new translation of two Chinese classics describing the essential philosophy and practice of Tao, written long ago as maps of the way, Tao Te Ching and Zhuangzi. Cleary's presentation restores the power and mind-opening distinctiveness of the original text. The essential Tao, an initiation into the heart of Taoism through the authentic Tao Te Ching and the inner teachings of Zhuangzi. So pretty much, what I really want to quote unquote drive home is the new understanding of how we could use this book to just find ourselves in just the time that we're in right now of artificial intelligence illusion, the state of it, and then the different motives of it, energetically speaking, the different quote unquote agendas, energetically speaking, end quote. Because if no one standardly accounts for it energetically, then you won't be able to fucking predict the future. That's the thing. We're trying to, the intelligence, not good, not bad. It's trying to attempt, not good, not bad, to predict the future based on a different intellectual reason. And how do you do that? To see how are things being used in the present. Because if you study the present and the past, then you can know how the fucking future is going to work. 2012 underground shit. Within its snippets. Its secret snippets. So I might conclude the video right now, or I might read the table of contents of just the two books. So I'll read the table of contents. And I hope, for some reason, I hope the whole video got, I'm sure it did. Like, I'm sure, like, oh, orange. Dark orange. I'm sure the whole video got, up in here. Yeah, so the content, it's just the introduction, the Tao Te Ching, and obviously there's many different renditions of the Tao, obviously. And I probably have more different versions of the Tao Te Ching. I've had a different version of the Tao. I think it was just like, there was a certain Tao Te Ching and just like casual like leadership, and it just had such a unique, bright perspective. I don't think I have the book. I just rented it. So the contents of the essential Tao is the introduction, the Tao Te Ching, Zhuangzi, notes, and then just some backlog stuff. So it's just the Tao Te Ching and then Zhuangzi and then the notes. So it seems like 761 pages. So it seems like this version of the Tao Te Ching is 54 pages because it starts at page 7 and it ends at 61. So 61 minus 7 is 54. So it seems this version is 54 pages. So there's 54 pages. There's a 6-page introduction. And maybe I'll just read the introduction right now. Might as well. Yeah, it's like a 1, 2, 3. And the thing is, within this book, then the questions that we have, we could just find the quote unquote purity in the intelligence in people. Perhaps, maybe it's kind of rare because there's a bunch of toxic intelligence. And we could ask the particular question of certain particular questions within automation, like how is the automation being updated fairly within all of these replicated all-in-one platforms? And how is the law responding to that standard replication, quote unquote, in between macro and micro, end quote, standard copy and paste of process? So how is the automation process being updated fairly behind the all-in-one replication platforms, meaning just the governmental systems, you know, and the judiciary systems, you know? So because obviously within that, there's a different layer of the data pipelines that it's like the data pipeline walls are throughout the different systems of industries, right? And for me to intuitively say that, and people and the companies just peep game and follow the spirit and them fucking lie to themselves, and they're just totally oblivious that spirit's doing all of this on a whole different level, and them just being totally ignorant to that shit, and then just them receiving, oh, new fucking updates, new fucking breakthroughs, new innovation, oh, but we don't know how it fucking came about. It's not that shit. It's following up on the original spiritual wisdom shit and how pure preservation gods preserve pure preservation. Hello. And then just the narratives of the different polarities of metaphysical consciousness that we are kind of like flicking on and off of, right? So I think I'm going to conclude this video because, yeah, this was the intro, and I'm going to conclude the video right now. So if you're somewhat organized, then I urge you to, you know, I guess just quote unquote attempt to be formal, right? End quote, whatever the fuck that means. Like attempt to be formal. Like, what do I mean by that shit? Attempt to be formal. Okay, well, you know, I guess the casual gift I'm giving is just like going with a higher flow, right? Because I'm not necessarily forcing anything, right? That's the whole point of the DAO, and I want to get a different DAO. I think there's a certain library that has a different version of the DAO of leadership, and it's just a unique, it's a very fresh perspective of that one. And I just like, you know, the soul kind of just remembers its own shit, you know? Like you read a book and like the human brain, it doesn't necessarily know the whole fucking words of the book word for word, right? But you feel the book. Like when you read a book, you fucking feel it like years after you read it. But you know, like, and that wisdom kind of becomes a part of you, right? So the reason I brought up the other DAO was, I guess it just shaped that book, you know, a little book could like, you know, you don't really know what one little book can do for you, you know, based on how you resonate with it, right? And then how you apply it, right? And no one sees your process, you know, of how you're applying the knowledge. All you have to do is just come back and show up in the quote unquote workforce, end quote. And then, you know, just I guess hope God takes care of it, because like, you know, the human is trying to understand, okay, like the human's gonna expect shit, right? Just standardly, right? Like we're turning our needs into like, you know, the desires are kind of being inflated, kind of could be artificially, which isn't necessarily like the real picture, right? So we could expect that for our needs to get fulfilled, obviously we have to do some type of energy work, because without the energy work, then that's not creating or generating a different quote unquote energy for you to kind of like, you know, be kind of sick, like have a perpetual relationship with God, right? And I knew this presentation was going to come out like this. Like I knew on Monday I was going to like just kind of get it together, come on this shit and just fucking spit some shit, and obviously be maturely aware of not to say everything, obviously, of like other shit. Like I like, you know, people don't really realize how much I gauge myself, but that's just what it is. That's for me. But for me to refine this shit, like in the future, it's like there'll be a time while I'll be more like I'll be in a more spacious place to for me to review this YouTube shit, right? of all the shit blogs I post. Like what do these shit blogs really mean? And after me reviewing those shit blogs, then that's me just being like, okay, this is what I meant. That was relative at that time. It was pertinent at that time. And here's what I mean to clear up more confusion if there was any confusion. Because obviously in the future, I could like, people could have like, there could be some, leaning towards possibly, hopefully within the intelligence, there could be leaning towards some type of valid comment, right? Or valid like response, right? And within that valid response, hopefully the most valid I could respond to, because then what's it all like, like why are we even like doing this type of shit, right? Like what, like obviously someone's going to ask, like, why are you even like doing this type of shit? Like just in one rough example. And within that is the purpose of the soul and God will, in the end of it all, beyond the material, beyond the human mind, it will go beyond it all. And we're just reflecting that on a micro level. So that's why this temporary shit, I'm doing it for the soul. Because obviously someone will be like, well, like, what's this really doing for you? Well, I don't know. Let history fucking say that shit, So one more closing note is I kind of try to lean and intuitively organize for some of my presentations to have a rigid style. So where I could like have a foundation to know what I'm like, where I'm at within the intuition and what I'm fucking talking about that's relative to the times we're in. The essential Tao. And then, a mutual, what do you call that? A mutual relatable way we could look at where we're at in life. Relatable, right? It's not, we're trying to dissect it in such a way where it's relatable, and we could translate it where these energies differentiation offsprings from that, and from our individuation, there's less intelligence, confusion, and warfare. Hello, the state of the world. So this is an intro. Table of contents. I'll read the table of contents for this one, just because I read it for the other one. And then tomorrow I'll come back with the chapter ones. So there's only 3 parts to this. Beautiful. There's a dedicated to, let me just see this real quick. Hypatia. So there's some type of Greek goddess or Greek queen. And obviously, like, the fucking college life, there's certain websites that have explained the origin of the education system. So within that, we could then, how we could transmute it and transform it better is we could know the origin of it. So if the origin of that shit peeps game to a whole different spiritual field, then the effect and the byproduct of the byproduct will have to peep the game in due time. So that's why I'm like, I'm not doing any of this lower octave competition with anybody. I'm in my own lane. So dedicated to Hypatia, this book is devoted to the Orphic tradition and to its recovery from the suppressions of the past 6,000 years. In this partnership tradition, mathematics and philosophy were united. Providing the basis for religion and for daily life. The brilliant mathematician and philosopher Hypatia, a charismatic and popular teacher at the great University of Alexandria, was a wise advisor to the individuals and governments. She epitomized this wisdom tradition and was brutally murdered during its suppression by a Christian mob. Ironically, after her martyrdom, she was canonized in the Christian hierarchy as Saint Catherine of the Wheel, whose cult began in the 9th century of Mount Sinai. Okay. So math. Yeah, earlier I was talking about the math and the science and the etc. And obviously, like all these original open source key principles, they shall be balanced. So let me fucking they shall be balanced. And I know you fucking hear that. The world according to Grok. Okay, part 1. Dynamics and the Orphic Trinity in history. Dynamical views of history. Bifurcations of consciousness. Part 2. The Orphic Trinity in myth. the Orphic Trinity, the Orphic Tradition, the Orphic Tradition, the Orphic Trinity. Part 3, the Orphic Trinity in the Sciences, Chaos, Gaia, and Eros today. So, Dynamical Versions of History, Chapter 1, The World According to Grok, Chapter 2, Cognitive Maps and Mythogenesis, Chapter 3, The History of Histories, Bifurcations of Consciousness, The Ages of the World, Chapter 5, The Three Dynamical Epochs, Chapter 6, The Evolution of Consciousness, Chapter 7, The Goddess Trivia, Chapter 8, New Year Festivals, Chapter 9, The Long Line of Orphism, Chapter 10, Creation Myths, Chapter 11, Chaos and Cosmos, Chapter 12, Gaia and Eros, Chapter 13, The Wheel, Chapter 14, Orpheus Revisited, Chapter 15, Celestial Order, Chapter 16, Celestial Chaos, Chapter 17, Gaian Fevers, Chapter 18, Aerodynamics, ERO. And then there's notes, glossary, bibliography, index, and before the notes was conclusion. So there you have it. There you guys have it. I will read chapter 1 and maybe and tomorrow chapter 1 of each, or the first part of each, and then just refresh on this series being a class setting of how we're using AI within where we're at right now, and how this is just a new series presentation of that, you know. And then obviously following up with, the transits in the astro skies of the moon and its different orbits of different transits and aspects of, different key player, beacons of planets. So thank you guys very much. Thank you. So, let's see. Will I read the whole book though? Like, I could. Yeah, this book could be read through. So obviously the Tao will be read through. All right. So thank you guys. And yeah. So within this, it's like yeah. Thank you for resonating. And thank you for resonating within, just seeing how, like, so in the future, like, the content and how the content will be made, it's kind of like akin to like building a building, right? Because, for the content to ultimately be made, it's like there has to be some type of, like, obviously there has to be some type of outline and blueprint. And from that outline and blueprint, then different hats have to be worn in how the building will be built. So this is like the quote unquote, the spiritual intellectual property, right? End quote. And from that, it creates some type of outline and quote unquote blueprint, end quote. And for that, and from that, then we could, the building could, be created in such a particular way that's in alignment, resonance, and purity with the quote unquote original universe. You have the best life ever.